All right, it is time for a review of the BTT Manta E3EZ. Quick bit of business. BTT did send this to me free of charge for me to check out and give a quick review on it. No money's changed hands. And BTT occasionally does send me free stuff because I buy a ton of their stuff. I buy one of everything they make, it seems like. I've tried it all. Big boards, little boards. I've got the 10-port new EZ board running on my K2. So I'm always trying out new stuff. And occasionally BTT will send me some free stuff to, review and kind of add to my collection and do a review on and tell you guys about. So, all right, so what's this board about? Who needs this board? Why does this board exist? So, BTT has always made these cool little boards. It's kind of how, that's really their bread and butter. It's how I think how they really came to be, is they made replacement main boards for the Ender 3. So these are little 4-stepper boards. They have the same format and bolt pattern as the original Ender 3. The original Ender 3 came with loud stepper drivers and really weak main CPUs. So these had better CPUs. They had silent stepper drivers. And then they had some upgrades, like you could control the fans a little better, stuff like that. So they've put these out for years. These kind of a bread and butter for them. There's a 1.2, a 2, and a version 3 of these boards. As time goes on, people have started using Clipper more on these type of boards, whether it's Ender 3 or maybe you want a V0. These are really popular on a V0. But if you're going to run Clipper, you're going to have a Pi. And so your little tiny printer doesn't have a lot of room for a Pi. And you need a separate power supply for it. It's difficult to deal with, especially when you have not a lot of space. My V0, I used a Pi Zero. I used a little miniature Pi, and it ran on the UART off of the board. That's all these boards will support is a Pi Zero. And with a Pi Zero, you don't get any. Your ports are weird and small, and there's really not much you can do with this as far as extras. So these days, everyone wants to run this type of setup. They want to run Clipper. So BTT has started catering to that market, and they produce a whole line of boards. They're called the Manta boards. We'll zoom in a little bit here. So they make this whole line of boards called Mantas. And all of the Mantas have a place for a Pi CM4. So a Pi CM4 is this kind of format of a Pi. It's on a single board, and it has board-to-board connectors. It has these rectangular little rows of pins. And the Pi just sticks right onto the board. And all the Manta boards have this room for a Pi. And they all have beefy 5-volt regulators. I believe this has 5 amps of power. I'll get into the specs in a minute, but this has enough power to power a Pi. And if you don't put the board on the Manta, you can also run an external Pi and take the power off this board. So you don't have to have a power supply for your Pi. So this is BTT's Ender 3 sized board that is Manta series that takes the Pi. And they had to use EZ drivers to make this happen. So let's take a quick aside and let's look at EZ drivers. These are BTT's proprietary stepper driver. It is really closely based to a step stick. It has mostly the same pins as a step stick driver. So a step stick driver looks like this. It has 2 rows of DuPont pins, and one of the features of this type of thing is that you can plug this in backwards. It's very easy to plug in backwards. And it takes up more room, right? It takes up this much room on the board. So these little guys take up a lot less room. They are keyed, so they are much harder to plug in backwards. It's basically impossible to fully seat this backwards because the slot and the driver are keyed. So these are safer to use. They are smaller because when they go on the board, they only take up that much room on the board, and they come up vertically. And since they come up vertically, they can also have really good heat sinks. So you can see this guy has a heat sink wrapped all the way around both sides of the board. So really good cooling, takes up less space. So this allowed Big Tree Tech to put all of these drivers, all of this stuff densely packed, and all of this is Pi. This is all stuff that goes along with the Pi. So the part that's not covered up is for the printer. The rest of it is for the Pi. So this is a little larger than the old boards. Takes up a little more room. So that's one thing that is kind of maybe a little unfortunate about this board. It is a little fatter, but this will still fit in an Ender 3. Modbot has a really good video where he puts this into an Ender 3. It is very tight, and you have to be careful about this SD card reader that's here. Look how dense this is. Look at all the stuff on the back. And the silk screening is really cool on this board. The other thing that I'll give you the other quick con I have about this board. I wish that this board had variable voltages on the fans. So there was no regulator put on this board for 12 volt power. So if you have 12 volt powered fans, you'll have to run a separate buck converter for your lower voltage fans. On the bigger boards like the Octopus Pro, you have selectable voltages for fans, but it's just not possible on this board. I mean, look how tight everything on this is on this board. There's basically no room to put more jumpers, right? I'll go over one last thing that's cool about this board specifically over some of these other types of boards that you can get. This board will accept the 5160 drivers and run them at 48 volts. So this has separate voltage rail just for the steppers. So I'll be doing that. I'll be running 48 volts on this. There is a small 90 watt power supply available that'll fit in these small printers, and you can run higher voltage on your steppers. Let me go over real quick just some of the specs on this board, just in case you're looking for that kind of thing. So we've already talked about the board is a little bigger than your previous E3s, SKR Mini E3s. So this is a version 3. You can see it's a little bigger. Let's see. Lower right fastener is missing on this board. So on the E3 Mini, you can see all the white outlines here for the fasteners. This fastener down here at the corner is missing on this board because they have all the outputs for the Pi on this board. So this fastener is missing. The rest are still there. So there are still 1, 2, 3, 4 fasteners on this board, here, 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 and here. So it's not too bad, but just so that you know, there is one fastener that's missing. Let's see, this has the same MCU as the SKR Mini E3 version 3. It is a AMD Cortex running 64 megahertz STM processor. You do have 5 amps of 5 volt power, so you can either run the CM4 or you can run the an external Pi. There are 5 stepper drivers on this board versus all of the previous boards have 4. So I'll show you the version 2. You can see it a little easier. See the 4 heat sinks, 4 stepper drivers. This guy has 5. Again, because of these easy drivers, they have room to do that. There is, they advertise this as a second hot end output or extruder motor output. You could also run this on a printer that has 2 separate Z motors. That would be nice. There are 2 always on fans and 3 PWM controllable fans. Again, we talked about it doesn't have the voltage select on the fans, but there are lots of fan outputs. There is a CAN output on this board, and it has all of the ports that you need for the CM4 or the CB1. We'll talk about that in just a second. But it has HDMI and SPI. It's got USB outputs, so you can plug in a USB camera, Ethernet. It does not use these ribbon cables. If you use the CB1 does not have the circuitry for these two cables, but otherwise everything will work on, the CB1 will work on this. So I guess we should talk real quick about this. So Pis have been hard to get over the past year or two. So Big Tree Tech came up with their own compatible design of a CM4. So this is actually a Big Tree Tech CB1. So this is a slightly different CPU'd version of a CM4. It's got Wi-Fi on board. It has about a Pi 3 performance level. So this is really great for Clipper. It will not do the CDI, CSI. It will not do the camera ribbon cable. It will not do the DSI, the display ribbon cable. But you can plug in a HDMI output to this. It will work with HDMI, and it will also take SPI input for a touchscreen. So you can run Big Tree Tech's HDMI and SPI touchscreen displays. So kind of cool. So it plugs in right there. Let's see, what else do we need to talk about here? I think that's going to be about it. We've gone over the pros and cons. I will be putting this into my V0 over the next few weeks, and I will probably make another video, or you can also catch me on Twitter. I'm usually posting all sorts of updates to Twitter, and I will for sure put my experience out there with this board. Anyway, this video's gone on long enough. I hope you enjoyed.